Okay, let's go on to Athenian life for men and women. So this is the fourth slide in your slideshow. So the men and women had very different roles in Athens. The men mostly worked outside of the home. They were farmers and artisans, and they traveled. Um, and the women mostly focused in their home. So they took care of their home. They took care of their family. Usually, they only left their homes if they wanted to attend a special event. But again, it's very similar to what we've seen in other civilizations where the men work outside of home, that is their role, and the women are in the home taking care of the house and their children. Um, in Athens, they did not consider women that were educated to be equal to men. Today, everyone's equal, right? We consider women to be equal to men. They did not in Athens. They believed that the women always had to be under the care of a male. If a woman left the house, she had to be accompanied by a man, a relative. Okay. Um, some women had more freedom, especially if they were not born in Athens, but they lived in Athens. But for the most part, the women stayed home. Um, let's see. The next slide, let's talk about slaves. So it was very common to have slaves back in ancient times. We know that from other civilizations we've learned about. In Athens, it was very, very common because the Athenian households used slaves to do the housework, to help the women. So the women were in charge of the house, telling the slaves what to do. Now, not everyone had slaves. Of course, usually it was the wealthier families that had the slaves. If they had money to buy a slave, then they could have a slave. Usually the poorer families did not. And there were slaves that were men and slaves that were women. The men usually worked outside and they did hard labor, body, physical labor. And then the women usually were inside cooking or cleaning. Um, Eventually, some slaves could buy their freedom, but it was very rare. And again, it was very, very normal to have slaves. Usually, they were someone who had committed a crime or they were a prisoner from another city state or from another country.